Welcome to the Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Shepard.
And I'm your co-host, Carrie.
And we are coming to you live from our living room.
Live from Avon, India.
Live from the Indianapolis area.
Welcome.
Hope you are having a great week. And let me just ask you, Carrie, how was your week? Do you remember this week?
Man, it was a fast week. It was good.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of a fast week. One of those where our family is well right now, and so I do want to just say praise the Lord for that.
Thank the Lord, all that sickness is over.
Ooh, we went through some sickness for a little while, which is so odd for our family because we're kind of January. It got cold. Do you hear that?
Yeah, it's like a motorcycle or something outside.
Anyways, and so very unusual August. It
to be
hit
sick.
us.
I know.
Yeah, it's
Weird.
hot. It's the end of summer. It was very strange, but. I don't know. It was whatever the.
We're also in sports season, so we have Tommy in soccer and Lois in volleyball, and like every night of the week, not every night. Well, I was gonna say every night of the week is something, but and most of it's sports. So that's been a lot, but it's fun too. I love watching them play.
Oh, man, it is. It's a great time of year. I feel like we're coming into college football. NFL starts up. Our kids are in sports. Here in the Midwest, just amazing weather because it's in the 80s and the 90s during the day, but then it's like in the 60s at night.
Yeah, it's been so warm. It's been nice.
Yeah, isn't our life just so perfect?
That's what we want everyone to think.
I think everyone listening to this would be like, you know what? I wish I had the shepherd's life.
Well, we're not giving them the details. If you really think you want our lives, come sit and have a coffee with me.
Honey.
I can tell you the nitty gritty.
Okay. And this will be the last time I co-host. We'll say goodbye to her tonight. And,
well, we have regular stuff.
No, we do. Stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. What's regular stuff?
Like problems.
We do?
Yeah.
Like what?
Absolutely.
There is nothing.
I said, come have a coffee. I'll give you the nitty gritty.
Well, I would like to set up the first coffee date with you tomorrow morning.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, hey, we are here this evening, and we're going to start a new topic. It may take us a couple episodes to get through, but we want to kind of jump right into it this evening. We want to be talking about gender roles. And there kind of is a reason that we're addressing this. We've wanted to, actually for a long time now, speak on this subject. We did a little bit right around maybe our first 6, 7, 8 episodes, somewhere right in there. We touched on a little bit, talking about marriage and dating. But there does seem to be this kind of pandemic of confusion when it comes to the home, when it comes to the married life, and then especially in gender roles. Anyone listening to this podcast, whether you're a Christian or not, knows that here in the United States, gender is something that you hear all the time. It's always an argument. We've come to a place where we're now arguing what is a male and a female, and there's other podcasts out there you can probably jump on and listen to. We know of one that they've gone into great detail talking about that subject. That's kind of not where we're going. What we'd like to do is kind of lay a foundation on marriage. And it's not that Carrie and I have mastered it. I would say we have, but Carrie obviously thinks that we've got a lot of mistakes and problems. But
adding that to my list.
This is a subject that we are passionate about, and we do want to be a help. And we speak around the country doing different couples conferences, and this is often a subject that is asked or comes up, and or both of us have different lectures that we do and teach on. And so we're hoping that it will be a blessing to you. And we've got more notes probably than we usually do, but we didn't want to attack it in a way that is throw somebody off and or is jumping around back and forth. We wanted to kind of, hey, let's hit this some more in I want to use the word exegetical in more of a
chronological order.
That sounds good. Let's go with that.
No.
Yeah. Anyways, we just want to be a little bit more uniform in the way that we approached it. So, Carrie's going to start us out tonight. Let's talk about gender roles. Go for it, Carrie.
Yeah, well, we're just kind of jumping in talking about accepting gender roles And I think that's a big thing in our culture is like the pushback. Actually, it might be kind of coming back around, but definitely the rise of feminism caused these major pushbacks against femininity in its traditional sense. And I do feel like that's culturally maybe starting to recede a little bit, but it's definitely something that I want to be influential in, and I want to influence my girls in that femininity is a beautiful thing and accepting that about ourselves as women. And then I think it's super healthy for a man to accept his manhood and to be comfortable with expressing himself as a man in our culture. And I don't think that's been the case, for the last 50 years. I think there's been a big pushback against traditional gender roles. And by traditional gender roles, I'm not referring to like who does the dishes. I get so annoyed when people throw out like housework as defining your gender. That's so annoying.
Let me mark this
Put
off
that
here.
down.
Point number 2
But
taken out.
I do feel like a lot of people use very simplistic things to, oh, well, don't define me by, cooking or cleaning the house. And I get like that can be thrown in there sometimes, but I'm talking about femininity in the framework. Like, I'm proud that I have the ability to bear children. I'm proud that I enjoy making a home. I'm proud that I have different hormone levels than my husband, and that's something that I pay attention to and assist my body in, those phases. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. And I think accepting femininity for women is so important.
Yes.
That we're nurturers, that we naturally are better with kids. And again, these are all general statements. I realize there's exceptions to every rule, but I think being proud of your gender and being accepting, like it's okay that I'm drawn towards this or that because it feels natural to me. And so many times, and we've even discussed this too, I've talked to young ladies and they might be going off to college, and that's always like within our Christianity, they say, well, I want to major in this or do that. I'm not going for a husband. I'm not going to find a husband. And I'm like, it's okay if you want to find a husband.
Sure.
Like, that's okay. It's all right if you want to date. It's okay if you're attracted to guys, and part of the reason that you're leaving the home and you're going out on your own is to explore and discover relationships and work toward marriage. That's a wonderful thing to have as a goal. And so I think accepting your gender and accepting some of the norms about that and the natural inclinations that come with it, I think it's a beautiful thing.
I love it. I love it. I think part of accepting gender roles, Kara, as you kind of mentioned some generalities here, but we are definitely recognizing God's design. And from a biblical perspective, when you look at the book of Ephesians, there's actually some clarity that comes from a husband submitting himself to his wife and a wife submitting herself to the husband. And we have Christ who loved the church, and so that example is given. But there is a differentiation of, or a separation that does come, that God has given. Specifically, there are some things that men, we are told we are to do. Husbands, love your wives. We are told to provide for our family. There are some biblical aspects of a gender role that I think for us as Christians, we need to embrace and come back to. Not add to. I'd love, Kara, what you brought up. I think so many times as Christians, here's what we do is like, okay, we need to accept God's design. So here's God's design. Women are to be in the kitchen. Men are to be, the ones bringing home the money. And we kind of as Christians have gotten to this place where we're using some pretty simplistic things to define what we believe. I saw somebody, this is a true story. I saw somebody on X here recently trying to prove the difference of gender roles and the way that genders are to dress. And they were using bathroom signs as like their ammunition. Like, just look at bathroom signs. A man is, a woman has on a dress. And I was like, okay, I see where they were going, but it was super embarrassing.
If that's like your main
man.
point, a bathroom sign.
Yeah, that's really sad.
The reasoning's not very deep there.
If you go back to the Dick Van Dyke Show and you look at, or Andy Griffith, and you look, okay, stop going back to old shows or bathroom signs to try to prove a point.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Word of God. What does the Word of God say? And there are some very specific things that I think we need to embrace and be okay with. And I like how you said, like, you're really good with, you bear children and you're great. You are, I would personally say you're better with our kids than I am. You've got grace, patience, even love, like tonight or here recently. Actually, I can't remember. It was during Rose was they were crying about something. That's how much I cared about it. But I'm like, I just want to be like, hey, toughen up, Buttercup. You're gonna be okay. But Carrie's there, and that's okay to embrace that, like to be okay with.
Yeah.
I'm out in the garage, and I put all of our listeners are gonna be so proud of me. But I put new headlights on my Toyota by myself.
Wow.
Yes.
That is very manly.
I was out there, had my cutoff T-shirt on, and
that's very attractive.
Had some grease on my hands.
Oh my!
Okay, well, anyways, and
do tell.
Me and YouTube, we put these headlights in, but you came out, you said hello, but Carrie didn't offer to help, and
I would absolutely never offer to help.
And I'm okay with. There are some things I generally like to try to have the cars filled up with gas, and I take it for oil changes. And there's things that both you and I have owned.
Yeah.
The problem with our culture is everyone, including some Christians, want to tear that down because it's used as ammunition. You do this and I do this. Sometimes we can need to step back. These are not hills worth dying on.
Right.
And everyone's, individuality comes in. It's going to be different. But for me as a Christian, I think the first thing I would say and how to accept a gender role is recognize that God does have a design.
He does. And we have to recognize that that design is not explicitly mentioned as who does the dishes and who installs new headlights in the vehicles. It's the man is the provider and the protector and the leader.
Right.
And I think that's been pushed back against. Women traditionally have more emotional, spiritual experiences than men, generally speaking. And so a lot of times in a home that can be expressed in a leadership way where the wife cares more about going to church, cares more about family devotions, cares more about the kids going to Sunday school and these things than the husband does. However, that is one thing that's a little bit against scripture. And it's not that, the wife can't care more, but it's that the husband should take that active leadership role in spiritual things. It does not have to look like the wife wants it to look. It doesn't have to be her preferences. There are things that we do or don't do in our home that other ministry people think, oh, I would do more or I would do less. And I'm like, well, that's great for you. But my husband prefers it this way in our home. And I want him to lead. And I want you to be to the kids and even to myself, that spiritual guide in our lives. So that if we struggle, we know we have a protector there that can say, hey, things are looking off. We need to straighten this up in our home. And it's not that, we all cower in fear, but that it's that we have that access to someone who loves us more than himself. And I think that leadership biblically is expressed, and it's not so much, oh, I'm going to go, change the tire and, no woman can do that. If you can change your tire as a woman, great, good for you. You probably should know how to do that. Things like that are okay. Right. And I think that brings us to our next point is that roles can be flexible.
That's right.
There have been times in our marriage where I've done all the finances. And there's been times where you've done them.
I was better at it.
You were far better at it. And that's why you're still doing them. I gave that up and will never go back.
I'm kidding with you.
There have been times where I've worked a lot, and there have been years where I have not worked at all. And those roles are flexible, and it's okay. There might be moments in your marriage where the wife makes more than the man. Listen, it's fine. It's not in the Bible. A woman is not allowed to provide for her family. In fact, we see in the model of Proverbs 31 where, the author is telling her son, here's what a virtuous woman looks like. And she's actually very astute in the business world.
Very.
She's buying and selling fields. She's making things to sell at market. And so we see that the example of like the perfect woman in this proverb is that she is very good in business, and that's okay. And different seasons of gender roles changing are acceptable. Yeah. But you want to make sure the framework is there, that the framework that God laid out where the husband takes responsibility for his home and he has that leadership is solid. And then that the wife is the nurturing kind of picture of the Holy Spirit, right? Where she comes in on the emotional level and nurtures not just the children, but she nurtures her husband, and she's a helper to him. And that helper is not, it can be physically, but it's not exclusively a physical helper.
Oh, that's good.
It's an emotional help.
Right.
And I think that framework of marriage is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I want to lean into this just a little bit, Kara, because you said, be flexible. And it is true that family dynamics and careers and even for us, ministry, it does change. It goes back and forth. There's been moments for us that it did not work for us for you to work outside the home. We had 5 kids very close together. It would just, the dynamics were you needed to be at home raising our kids. And then times change. Now we have all 5 kids that are in school. And so, again, our family dynamics in the home change. I think for everyone, you need to realize quickly that there are those moments where we have to be able to embrace individuality for every family. It means this, we need to, if we're not careful, what we do is we embrace something that is somewhat of a stereotype.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we fall into this where we're not able to critically think through maybe their dynamic is different than ours. We judge this person because, she works and he stays at home. It says, wow, that's not right. Or we judge, I saw this guy's vacuuming and my dad would have never vacuumed. It's a stereotype that oftentimes we become very judgmental of other people. And so roles aren't necessarily rigid. It's okay for spouses to adapt and help really in non-traditional ways. For Carrie and I, those roles are very fluid, more so than I would say other families. For instance, you do work outside of the home. You're a pastor's wife, you're a wife, you're a mother, but you work for a business. And so for you, there are some that would judge us like, no, she should just be a mom, and she's a pastor's wife. All attention should be there. Or for me, I do very much enjoy helping around the house. I've kind of adopted, like, I've got things that I just help you with, floors, and I loaded the dishwasher tonight, and I wasn't looking for, I don't want to bring up attaboy button, but I was not looking for don't roll your eyes, woman. I was not looking for a pat on the back or, wow, thank you so much. Just honestly, like, I just help. And so I think sometimes as Christians, we need to be careful that we are kind of challenging just these stereotypes that we saw grandma and grandpa, and then we adopted them as biblical. Then we become extremely judgmental, which leads to becoming a Pharisee. And then we're just living this life that is miserable for all. Whereas for us, we've just adapted. Hey, we're embracing our individuality. We're going to be flexible, and we're not going to just try to fit a mold that fits everyone.
And that support for the other's preference is so vital. So I didn't grow up with a dad that cooked or cleaned. Now, obviously, he was helpful, but I didn't see him like vacuuming the floors or doing dishes. Hardly ever. It was very rare.
I never did with my dad.
Yeah.
Ever.
It wasn't.
Ever.
Yeah. Back then it was just,
right.
It was a lot more separated. And that's okay. If that's, again, the whole point of this is being flexible and supporting your spouse.
Yeah.
My parents were very extremely traditional in that, my mom, I think she worked a few months, while us kids, now she works now, but while we were home, I think she did a few months of work and then she was home with us the rest of the time. And my dad did not hardly do anything at the house.
Yeah.
He did do like outside stuff, landscaping, that, but it was all on my mom, and there were 5 of us. And so I didn't grow up with a dad that took part in the home maintenance on the inside, but my husband does. That was something to get used to.
Yeah, sure.
I don't remember my dad really ever caring that much about it. And so it took some getting used to that my husband did. And he had comments about the house and he had preferences, and, he wanted us all to work together and let's section the house off and we all do our part. And I'm like, this is kind of my thing though, and it was some adjustment. On the flip side, you never had a mom that worked.
Right.
You've never known your mom to have a job.
No.
And she still doesn't to this day. And so when the kids all went to school and I'm saying, I want to get a job, that's something that you had to adjust to. And you kind of had to wrap your head around, okay, that's, you didn't grow up like that.
Yeah,
so
it's different.
It's just, we've come to the point where these are not things that are written, in some law somewhere.
Right.
Women are not allowed to work and men are not allowed to help with the house. I think that's a very extremist way of viewing the world. There's just no 2 families that are alike, and we all have different needs.
Right.
My husband has a different personality in that it's difficult for him to focus and get anything done if we were to live in a messy, unkept house.
Right.
And I'm actually a little bit that way too. So I mean, a lot of times people walk in our house and they're like, how do you have 5 kids? Where's the mess? And we're like, we can't live that way.
Right.
But that's not saying that everyone has to be like us. A lot of women, they prefer when their kids go to school, they still remain home. They love to bake and to cook and to meal prep. I am not that woman. I don't love it. I will do it because I have to, but I'm not in the house in an apron and, dancing around my kitchen. Like we do the food because we'll die if we don't, but I prefer to do something else. And so supporting each other, me saying to my husband, all right, you prefer a clean house. Let's divvy this up and let's work together to get to the point where you're comfortable in our home and you love to come home and you love to be in your home that you pay for and that you've worked so hard for. I truly desire that for you. Yeah. I want you to walk in here and love your home. But then the flip side is you want me to feel the same about our life. Yeah, you want me to wake up every day and have excitement over my life and the way I can use my brain and my time. And we really support each other in that. And I think that has been a learning curve. Right. Because we both did grow up so traditionally, but it's been a great it's been a great ride. Right. Like walking through those times together.
So here's 2 things I think we can one thing you can work on, and as Carrie and I have, and that is this, continue to communicate these things. Carrie and I did not come to this just conclusion like, oh, well, you accept this, I accept this. These are things we've had to communicate. If you're early, you've just been married recently, this is something to start talking about. You have to, get down and let's write these things out, sign a contract in blood. It just talk through it.
And it does change over time.
Right. Like we said, it was kind of weird you wanting to work. Like I remember when you came up and said, all the kids are going to school and I think I want to start, I think you sold makeup for a little while or whatever it was. Like, I think I want to start doing this. I was like, oh, wow. Well, really? I mean, okay, well, and then the conversations we've had about being okay with both of us helping out in roles. Again, this is something you got to communicate, got to talk through.
Yes. Yes.
And then before we just move on from this point, and in accepting gender roles there's 2 things to this. Don't think we just lean into it's haphazard. It's you do whatever, because the problem with that mindset is it's gotten us to where we are today, where no one wants roles. It's just, I want to be a boy, I want to be a girl, and there's no difference. And That's not where we're going or leaning with this at all. It's why I really said recognize that God does have a design. There is male
Yeah.
and there is female. There's things that females will always do better. Number one,
Yes.
Having babies. We stink
That
at
is
it.
number
So
one.
there are things that guys are always going to do better.
Yeah.
And if you break down those barriers and say there's no roles, it's just everybody equal, that's when you get into this nonsense of everyone sharing the same bathrooms. That's when you get into
Right.
the nonsense of girls and guys sports and guys and girls sports.
Yeah.
God has made male and he made female and he made roles specific to the family.
Mm-hmm.
What we're saying is be careful not to stereotype and bring your personality or your preference into it and then push that on everyone else.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes very dangerous.
And I do love the word, I keep going back to the word framework. You can frame a house and then how you decorate the inside looks different. And we live in a neighborhood where the houses look very much the same. The one builder did one big neighborhood. So a lot of the houses look the same, but on the outside. But when you go in them, they're all specific to those families' preferences. And I think that's kind of the mental image. All houses have to have, oh gosh, I shouldn't have gone down this road. Studs.
Yeah.
Like the boards and then the drywall.
I thought you were talking about me.
Flooring. I got a stud in my house.
You got a stud.
I got a stud. But they all have to have certain elements, just like a family does. A family has to have a protector. Someone has to protect the family. Right. Someone has to provide. Someone has to nurture. And so all these, these like frameworks to the home are necessary and biblical. But then how you decorate the home and how you make it your own, God does leave room for flexibility, and that's a beautiful thing. But I think you find that flexibility and you find that support and you find that individuality through getting the framework correct.
Right.
If you don't have those necessary elements, everything else is more difficult. Finding out, your identity and who am I as a woman and, how am I, what should I be as a man? If you can individually get those things straight, then it will be much easier to fill in those spaces of flexibility,
right?
And those will change over time as well.
Yeah.
I think, walking through the different stages of life, it's interesting to see how my femininity has developed and how your masculinity has developed. And we have seen growth in one another.
Very much.
And, as a woman, you might be the total opposite spectrum as I am. You might hear my story and think, Carrie, I'm exactly opposite. I work full time. We're just starting our family. I want to go home. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to cook all day, a meal plan, and I'm excited to do those things. And I remember where you are because I was there. How old is Tommy? He's 15.
Yeah.
Turns 15 next week. And I remember saying, when we get pregnant with our first baby, I don't want to work anymore. And we sat down and had that conversation because we'd been married for 2 years and we'd both worked the whole time. And so it was this conversation of how are we going to make this work for our family where I can stay home with children. And so I understand where you are in that life stage too. And so these things are movable. It's not that you sit down and have a conversation and say, this is forever. We can never adjust.
Yeah.
No, you can.
Absolutely.
But support one another through it and keep the framework intact.
I love it. I love it. What a great analogy you used there, Kara. Illustration. That was wonderful.
Thought of that all by myself.
So here's what we're going to do. We're 30 minutes into this. So I think what we'll do, Kara, is our next podcast, what we're going to roll into is really how to support these roles as an individual, but then also me supporting you and yours.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, that those goalposts have moved, and it has for me as well.
Yeah.
And you've had to support me through some very difficult and trying things.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this comes to play, but male and female both. We think different. Our hormones are different. And so we've got to be able to support each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we'll head in this next one. But here's what we do want to do is just ask you, what is probably something that has helped your relationship? What is a question, maybe even that you have, a very specific scenario? We won't mention your name and we'll keep it anonymous, but write in a question and how do we approach this, or my husband does this, or my wife does this, how would you handle it? We'd love to answer those. Send us in maybe one of your favorite Bible verses that y'all use as a family, and how has this been fluid, or how has maybe even the start of this series kind of helped you? And we have literally hundreds of listeners every week. And so if you're listening right now, take a moment and shoot us an email. It's a forward podcast at outlook.com. And or we're on all types of social media, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure you have a fake Facebook out there at church. I was just told
somebody brought that up.
Somebody at church brought that up. So, and I just remembered, man, I should have told you that. Anyways,
I will investigate.
Find Carrie, and it's not just the Carrie that has 12 followers. So find the real Carrie, and or you can find me I'm on X and Instagram and Facebook. Carrie the same. And actually, we have TikTok now.
We also have a Forward Podcast TikTok, so you can find us on TikTok.
We've got to start developing.
We don't have very many videos yet. Well,
I don't even have
do you
TikTok.
call them videos? Reels?
Reels, probably. Yeah. And we're on YouTube, so you can also comment on there. But we want to hear from you, and we'll answer as many of those and get to those as much as we can. And then we're going to dive right into supporting your spouse in these roles. And so make sure you share this on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Kara, why don't you close this out?
Yeah, just thanks for listening, and we'd love to hear from you, and we will talk to you next week. Have a good week.